Now and forever, we bring IT to life.
Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for standing by. Good day and welcome to the Connect with Remedy monthly webinar series. Today's call is being recorded, and at this time I would like to turn the conference over to your host, Mr. Greg Keoy. Please go ahead.
Great, thank you, Paula. And everyone, welcome to this month's Connect with Remedy webinar. We are covering Remedy 9 Midtier, Enterprise Speed, Power, and Availability. And we have Gourav Jain from engineering that will take us through this content. And during the presentation, if you had any questions, please ask them in the Q&A pod of the WebEx, and our panelists will be happy to answer those questions during the session. And now I'll turn it over to you, Gourav.
Yeah, hey, thanks, Greg. And hi, everybody. Thanks for joining the Connect with Remedy webinar. My name is Gourav Jain, and I am a staff specialist product developer in BMC, and I work with Remedy Midtier team. So in today's webinar, we will discuss about 9.0 Midtier, which becomes more faster and more powerful with 9.0 release. So this is the agenda for the day. First, we will talk about all the powerful features of 9.0 Midtier. Then we have a quick demo in which I will cover few new features and some debugging ideas related to cache, and at the end we have a Q&A session. But meanwhile, if you have any questions, then please post them in a chat window. So these are few categories in which I categorize my 9.0 Midtier features. So first we will talk about all the features which enable us to deploy Midtier as a shared service. And then we will talk about response time monitoring tool, and at the last we will see what are the areas where we have improved our performance. So let's start with Midtier as a shared service. So this is very powerful concept which 9.0 Midtier supports. Midtier as a shared service is a multi-tenant Midtier cluster. It is a multi-tenant Midtier cluster. In this type of deployment, we deploy Midtier in a cluster environment, and all the tenant servers share the same single Midtier cluster, and users from all tenants use the same Midtier cluster for interacting with their respective AR servers, AR tenant servers. And here, so my diagram we are showing, here we have two diagrams. One is one where we did not deploy Midtier as a shared service, and right side we have a Midtier as a shared service. So in this diagram we see like we always need a Midtier and AR server for a tenant. So tenant 1 need a Midtier one, and again we need a one AR server for that tenant. So it's a one-to-one mapping between one-to-one mapping between AR and Midtier. But at the right side we have a cluster of Midtier which actually serve all the tenants. So this is a deployment diagram which shows like Midtier as a shared service. So we will see in details like what are the features we have deployed for to enable this feature. But before that, these are some benefits which we get when you deploy Midtier as a shared service. Shared service mode will improve your reliability, serviceability, scalability, and resource utilization. We will see all these benefits after we cover our features in detail here. So these are the 4 core features which actually help us to deploy Midtier as a shared service. But these features are not interrelated to each other. We can use them independently also. Like we can use the clustering without any other features, and you will get the high availability and seamless failover. In the same way, we can use the enterprise centralized configuration server to manage Midtier configurations. So it depends on your requirement, but if we use all of them, together, then we will get a good deployment model, which actually help us to save our deployment cost, and that is our basic aim. So now let's discuss about what is clustering and how it reduces our cost. So before going into detail like how Nano Midtier will support these features, I just want to spend few minutes on Tomcat clustering. So in the context of Tomcat clustering is a collection of two or more Tomcat instances which are running in parallel but working as a single instance to provide high availability and seamless failover. So in a cluster environment, Tomcat share the session information between nodes so that end user does not feel failover in most of the cases. So there are different techniques which Tomcat use for sharing session information between nodes. In our case, we use in-memory session replication. In this technique, Tomcat share all the session related changes to all nodes during each request processing. So as a result, all nodes always have complete session information for all users at any time. In-memory session, but we have one condition here, like in-memory session replication only works with sticky session. So that's why our load balancer should be configured in sticky session mode. Now we have a question like why we choose Tomcat for our clustering. We choose Tomcat because Tomcat is an open source software, open source web container, and in Tomcat clustering is easy. Means creating cluster is very easy in Tomcat compared to other web containers. We know the Midtier is a web application, so it should work on other web containers also. So this is a basic diagram. This is a very basic deployment diagram where we deploy Nano Midtier in a cluster environment. It has two Tomcat instances, nodes, node 1 and node 2, and on each node we have Nano Midtier. We also have a load balancer for balancing our user loads. So now let's see how it works. So let's assume two users, user A and user B are trying to log in into the system. And because of load balancer, request 1 from user A goes to Midtier 1, which is running on node 1. So node 1 received this request. It creates a user session for session X for user A, and because this node is running in a cluster environment, so at the same time it will actually copy this session X to node 2 also. It passes this information to node 2 also. And now node 2 also have a same session X. Same thing happen with node 2 also. When request 2 comes to node 2 and node 2 create a session Y, it again replicate this session to node 1. So this is called session replication. So because of this session replication, at any point of time, all nodes have all session information for all users. So now let's discuss about like what happens when we have a failover. So let's assume node 1 is down due to some power failure or due to some anything, it's down. And load balancer know about this. So now when user A made a new request for fetching data from server, and load balancer knows that node 1 is down and he is not able to serve this request, so it passes this request to node 2. And node 2 already have a session X for that user, so it will serve this request without any asking for relogging, because it does not consider this request as a new request. So it just serves this and user will get the data. So in a cluster environment, in most of the cases, user does not see the failover itself. So this is a session replication in a Midtier, in a Tomcat environment. But from this diagram, as we understand from this diagram, that in a cluster environment, Tomcat needs to do some extra work for replicating the user sessions. So this extra work will result in more network traffic and CPU consumption. So to minimize these, we did lot of changes in Midtier so that we will not see any performance regression, and our Midtier will perform good in a cluster environment also. So in the next slide, we will discuss like what are the changes we did to support this clustering mechanism. So first and most important things which we reduced the size of HTTP session objects, so network traffic will less between nodes. And we also removed the non-required HTTP session changes from the application so that session replication only happen on login and logout requests. We also did some specific error handling and error messages for graceful failover scenarios. So that when we have a failover, system will notify the user for what to do next in failover scenario. And in most of the cases, we just need to refresh the browser. As we know, backchannel calls are backbones of Midtier. So we implemented the retry mechanism in a cluster environment so that user will get the expected result in failover scenarios also. And we know that user can deploy its own DVF plugin in Midtier. So we provided a guideline for storing information in HTTP session objects so that their DVF plugin will work in a cluster environment also. So here we just completed our clustering part. Now we will discuss about like what is multi-tenancy. So as we know, existing Midtier before 9.0 does not have a concept of tenancy. We can add multiple AR server in existing Midtier also, but we know that all AR servers are belong to same customer. So 9.0 comes with multi-tenancy concept. I mean, now single Midtier can serve multiple tenants. Here each tenant has its own AR server. So in the place of one-to-one mapping, now we can support one-to-n mapping. And we achieve Midtier multi-tenancy using virtual URL mapping. So each tenant has its own virtual URL and each user for that particular tenant access the Midtier using that virtual URL. Sorry. All the Midtier operations are now multi-tenant supported. So whatever you do in Midtier, it will be supported. It all are supported as a multi-tenancy mode. In multi-tenant environment, Midtier also supports tenant-specific configurations and logging. So all tenant-specific configuration goes in a separate file so there is no data sharing happens between tenants. To support this feature, we also have a onboarding and offboarding wizard in Midtier configuration tool. Using that, you can onboard and offboard tenants from Midtier. And this is the N+1 deployment feature, which actually helps us to scale up and scale down dynamically depending upon resource usage. So this is also a powerful feature which provides us an ability to scale up and scale down the size of nodes in cluster environment. Depends on your user load. So let's assume like when you have high number of user requests and you need extra capacity. So this feature will help you in that cases, and you can add a new Midtier in a cluster dynamically without any restart or without any major changes in cluster. And this newly added Midtier seamlessly starts serving requests and share the load among other Midtiers in a cluster. Same way, if you think like you have a less number of users and you want to remove one mid-tier from a cluster environment, you can do that one also. And these all things are done in a configuration level. So in that case, the remaining mid-tier can handle the load without affecting the system performance. So here in N+1 deployment, good copy of cache is a very important thing which we need when we add and remove nodes from cluster. We will see when we discuss about caching, like what is a good copy of cache. So in the next slide, I will just talk about centralized configuration settings. So centralized configuration is a new concept where we store configuration settings in AR form instead of file systems. So before 9.0, we used config.properties for storing mid-tier configurations data, but using CCS, we can migrate these settings to CCS server. And what is CCS server? CCS server is a normal 9.0 AR server which has this functionality. And it also supports automatic synchronization. So if you do any changes in CCS server will push them to mid-tier using notification mechanisms. And in multi-tenant environment, it also supports global and tenant level configurations. It means if mid-tier is running in a multi-tenant environment, then all the tenant specific settings will store in tenant specific AR and all other global settings will go in CCS server. So using CCS, CCS server actually keep consistency in cluster environment, because if you change anything in a single mid-tier, CCS will push those changes to all mid-tier in a cluster environment. So you don't need to do changes on each mid-tier. So we just discussed about like what are the features needed, what are the features which enable us to deploy mid-tier as a shared service. So once you deploy mid-tier as a shared service, you will get these benefits, like you will get the reliability. In this diagram, like we have a cluster environment where we have a cluster of 2 mid-tier, but let's assume mid-tier 3 is down, then because mid-tier 4 is already in cluster and we have a seamless failover, so all the requests will be served by mid-tier 4. So in this way, you will get more reliability for your services. And this is my CCS server. It's a server group of CCS server. So we have a primary server, secondary and secondary 2 for centralized configuration. And we already discussed this slide, like when you deploy mid-tier as a shared service, you will get a maximum resource utilization because your single mid-tier cluster will serve multiple tenants. Instead of 1-to-1 mapping, here we have 1-to-n mapping. And it also increases your serviceability because it supports N+1 deployment, so you can add and remove nodes dynamically. And scalability. So using our tenant onboard visit, you can add and remove tenants also. So it will improve your scalability. You can scale means on demand anytime. It's just a configuration settings, and we have a visits for this one also. Let's add for offboarding and onboarding a tenant. So in my second feature is like response time monitoring, which is also a powerful feature in 9.0 Midtier. So it's a new browser-based widget which shows the response time of an access form. Using this tool, you can view the overall response time details. So, and it shows the last 3 transitions. So like if you access, so in a 9.0 Midtier, if you access a user form, then on the right side, on the bottom of the right side, you will see this type of icon. When you click on this icon, it will actually open an information bar which shows the response time details. And when you double click on this, it will show you a detailed view. And this contains this contains the last 3 transitions. So like if you on user form you did 3 time searches, then it will show all the time taken for 3 searches. So using this response time tool, end user can just, and if you are facing some response time related issue, then end user can just identify like where we have an issue. It may be because of network, it may be because of server, or it may be because of browser. But this tool at least gives some idea. So this is the response time monitoring. Now in the next slide onwards, we will talk about what are the performance improvements we did in Midtier 9.0. So these are the some categories which again I divided. First is a cache enhancement. Second is a pagination on search result list, and last one is a web report enhancement. So these are the enhancements which we did in 9.0 Midtier. First we will discuss about like what are the enhancements we did in caching. So as we know, caching is a very crucial for Midtier, and we almost cache everything in Midtier. So in 9.0 we did lot of enhancement in caching area. We optimize our caching mechanism and methodology so that it should not have duplicate data in cache. For this purpose, we introduced some new caches also, cache categories also, and because of these improvements, in multi-tenant environment, we are able to share metadata cache objects between tenants. So this is the biggest cache optimization in 9.0. So because of this cache optimization, we can share metadata between tenants also. I'm just talking about metadata. We are not sharing any data between tenants. Another area where we have improved is the cache validation and recovery. In 9.0 we added a new concept of taking a backup of good cache and use that backup at later when you start Midtier, instead of doing preload every time, which is a very time consuming process. So instead of preload, you can use that good copy of cache. So for this, we introduce a log file in a cache directory which tells us the status of our cache. So if you see shutdown underscore completed status, it means our cache is good, and we can use that cache for recovery. So as we know, so when we use this cache validation and recovery, so like in sometimes Tomcat server caches or Windows explicitly stop the Tomcat service. So these type of events actually causes a cache corruption or cache truncation. So we try to resolve this problem in our using good copy of cache. So if you provide the good copy of cache to Midtier, then on startup, Midtier will validate the existing cache, and if it notices that some issue, then it will automatically restore the cache from the backup location. So you don't need to do preload, but after doing this, you need to sync it from server, so that if something has changed between your good copy of cache and this restart, it will come from and it will update the existing cache also. Same way, we also harden our sync cache operation so that you don't need to do flush every time when you do some definition changes on server. We also did lot of changes in the cache setting page so that admin user can debug cache related issues. So these are the some changes, these are the some enhancements which we did in a caching area. In the next slide, we will talk about, so like this is my cache optimization result. So here, this is a backup directory where you can provide your location of your good copy of cache. And we also added some sync status. So if you do a sync, so actually it will update this, like not something is not started, it's completed, nothing to sync. If its server is nothing has changed, nothing change happen on server, then it will show nothing to sync. And in this slide, we are showing like in a multi-tenant environment how we share the metadata between tenants, between cache objects. So like in a left side with a single tenant, and right side we have a 4-tenant cache. So we notice like with a single tenant with the 4 tenants, we have a same number of objects in a cache for active links. And this is happen because we share metadata between tenants. And those are the higher number which only for customization. So we did not completed all type of caches. We just implemented these for few type of caches. So in next slide we will discuss about what is the search result pagination. So in some cases when a result is contain large number of records and when this data comes to browser, in most of the cases it will freeze the browser. So to solve this type of problem, we provided a default pagination on result list. For this, we added a new form level property, max entry return on a form. So if you set this value, the result list display the number of records equal to this value on one page, and the remaining page will be shown in subsequent pages. This property also provides a way to define different values for different forms. So if you want like on form A, you want 100 per 100 number of chunks, then you can define. But at the same time, on form B, you may be define a 200 or some other value. So, but if we don't define anything for this, then 1000 will be used as a default value. So we know like we have other values max, we get list, max entries written by get list, it's always have a default value 2000. So if you don't define anything, then system will use the 1000 as a default value, and if result list has a more than 1000, then they will always come in a chunk. They will never come in a single page. So by this we reduce this server or Midtier resource consumption. So it will actually reduce on the both sides, and server side also and a browser side also. Because in a browser side you need to render less data in a result list. So and my next one we will talk about web report enhancement. So we know like in a web reports, so we know like in most of the cases when you run a very large report, large data with a web report, it will actually put Midtier out of memory. So to reduce this type of error, we in 9.0 we did a better memory management to prevent out of memory errors, and we also introduced chunking mechanism to handling large data. We will see this when we see a demo, like what are the properties we provided for web reports, and we also added a new configuration, new property for limiting your number of concurrent report requests. So this is a new property which, so if you provide like 50 for that value, and if system receive more than 50 requests for a running report, then it will show us error to user. So like this is the error, like server is busy serving maximum number of reporting requests. So please try after some time. So these type of preventive mechanism actually prevent Midtier goes out of memory error. So now let's see a demo where I will show like how to onboard a tenant and some debugging things for caching related. Yeah. So here we have a Midtier configuration tool. So I log into the Midtier configuration tool, and here we have a tenant onboarding and offboarding link. So when you click on tenant onboarding link, it will actually open a widget which help us to onboard a tenant. So first it will ask a centralized configuration information. This is it's not a mandatory information. You can add a tenant without this also. So here I'm just in this setup, I'm just using the same this server as a centralized config server. And you need to provide a unique cluster ID for a cluster to identify a cluster. So I saved this successfully. It will modify the CC setting. In the next step, And here we have like on CCS, these are the two buttons we have, like to publish and to restore. So publish will actually publish my CCS changes to Midtier, to my local changes to CCS server, and restore will restore it from CCS. Okay, sorry, it's too fast. So here we are adding a tenant information. So my tenant name is a tenant one, and I'm just providing the all required information. So each tenant should have a virtual URL, virtual host name, and end user from that tenant will use this for accessing this Midtier. I also provided the web-based URL because these are the different for each tenant. And here I'm just associating this server with this tenant. So now tenant 1 has this server, because each tenant should have their own server. And these are some smart reporting information, as we don't have this setup, so that's why I'm not providing this information and just saving this. So once you save this information will go to CCS. So in this page, we see tenant specific configurations. Like these are the entries which we added in for web reporting. Like how many entries you want on a max entry screen, and what are the max entries exported from native reports and web reports. So these all are tenant specific settings, and these settings goes in a tenant AR server, means tenant CCS server. You can also define, if your tenant has a multiple AR server, then you can also define your authentication server and home page server. But here we don't have, so we use the same. And then at the end, you need to just preload this server for this tenant, and you are done. So now, and we have a tenant offboarding also, but I'm not doing this because I just want to access this. So once in the same way, when you delete it, and on the next page, you just need to delete the AR server for this tenant. And then cache cleanup. It will clean your cache. So we just onboard and offboard. Now we will access that tenant using that virtual URL. So end user from that tenant will always use this virtual URL for accessing this cluster of Midtier. So we log in into the system. So you see, like we are just using this 007362 for AR server for this tenant. And now in next few minutes, in my next one, we will see like we added few new JSP for debugging caching. So we will see those demo for those. So these JSPs are not available, so we need to change browser. We need to change the name in browser itself. So this is a main cache config cache JSP page where we have, it shows the information about cache. And ADV, this is my config cache advanced page. It will actually show information about like what are the objects you have in memory and what are the objects you have a cache in disk, on disk. So when you click on show detail, actually we are just getting all the objects which we have in a cache in memory. So these are the hash key and these are the name value pair. So this is the advanced page which we added in 9.0, and then this is again a next one with cache detail page. Here we can see like what objects we have in cache. So if I select a form and I need to pass this key to that, so it will give a metadata detail which we have in this cache. So all the metadata. So if you face something like, if you think like my cache is corrupted, then you can check these details on this cache detail page. And same way, we added a new JSP to remove a form from a cache, form object from a cache. So that JSP will be accessed via cache cleanup. This is the config cache JSP. Here you can select a form. You can select a here we list out all the form, and you can just provide a form name and clean. It will clean the cache object from. It will clean this form object from the cache. So once you again do a show detail, you will not see that form in a cache. So now we need to access it again, so that we will put it again in a cache. So I'm just doing that. This time, because it fetched the user form from the AR server, and it will again cache, Midtier again cache the form in a cache. So again we have a cache object. So by using this JSP, if you face like, if you see like, if you see like I have a problem on this form, then you can clean that form in a cache, and it will remove all the related objects also from the cache. So we just show the like how to add a tenant on, how to do onboarding and offboarding of tenant, and use of new three JSPs, which using that you can debug cache related issues. In my next slide, so in this webinar actually we just cover some Midtier topics like clustering and Midtier as a shared service, and how to use CCS, and what improvements we did in a caching. And in demo we get idea like how to add a tenant and delete a tenant, and how to use those JSPs in your environment. But those JSPs are not available directly. You need to change your browser. So all these topics are very well documented on our doc site, and you can find few links and on my reference page. So here done with and open for Q&A session. So if you have any questions, then just let me know. Just ask, please, sir.
Great. Thank you, Gourav, for the presentation. I do have some questions that I'd like to ask that came in. And again, if there are any questions that you would like to have asked, please ask them via the Q&A panel, and we'll get them to Gourav. The first question, Gourav, is, can I have an upgraded 9.0 mid-tier yet still have a downgraded AR system and ITSM applications at the 8.1 level?
Yes, we can use it actually, but whatever features 9.0 provides, 9.0 server provides, we will not get, like CCS, because CCS is a AR server feature. So it will not, so you will not be able to access those forms with older releases of AR. So you can use a new Midtier with older version of AR, but some features are not available.
Okay, thank you. Next question is, if I restart a mid-tier node in a cluster, what will happen to the existing users?
So in a cluster, for a minimum cluster, you need 2 mid-tiers. So once they have in a cluster, and if you restart a single mid-tier, then other mid-tier will serve all the existing users. But we have a here, but in some cases, some requests are in-flight requests. Those are already past the load balancer but not served. So those type of requests may see some errors. But every time Midtier will notify the end user like what to do next. Or in most of the cases, he just need to refresh that page, and he is able to do again all the actions.
Okay, thank you. Next question is, can the sticky bit be disabled in Tomcat clustering?
No. With in-memory session replication, we can't disable this.
Okay, thank you. And then my next, continue.
Yeah, but if you disable it, then you can make a cluster without sticky session also, but you will not get the in-memory session replication. So after every time if failover happens, user needs to relog in.
Okay. The next question is, in a multi-tenant environment, where do we store the tenant properties?
So if we are using CCS, then in a multi-tenant environment, tenant-specific properties goes to tenant server. So like if I am a tenant 1 and I have a server XYZ, so my all my tenant specific properties, those are related to me, related to tenant, go store in his own server. So those things, those settings will not go in global settings like in a my CCS server. So those things are not shared between tenants. And we also does not share the logging means loggers also. Like every tenant has their own logging log information.
Okay. And can you define what CCS is that you mentioned in your answer?
Yes, CCS is a centralized configuration server. This is a new feature which Nino AR added. So here we actually migrating our all file-based properties from in a form base. So now when you use CCS, you will store actually all your properties in a AR form instead of file. So it is very easy to manage when we store all the when we store the configuration related settings in a form, and it also make more secure.
Okay, thank you. This leads into the next add-on question, which is, if I'm using CCS, can I still make changes in the config.properties in Midtier?
Yes, you can, but those are not reflected, because when you make some changes in config.properties on next startup, we will actually sync with CCS. So it will override the value which we have on CCS. So if we have a property X, and for that we have a we have a Y value in config.properties and some other value in CCS. So on next startup, actually Midtier will patch that property from CCS and override the config.dat property. So if you are using CCS, then we suggest that always use the CCS for modification, or otherwise use the Midtier configuration tool. Never do a changes on file config.properties directly.
Okay, thank you. Next question is, what will happen when both my Midtier servers are up, but suddenly the Tomcat server crashes in one of the Midtier servers? Will some users experience disconnection?
No disconnection, yes, but they may see some error messages. And in most of the cases, if they do browser refresh, and if they are doing some operation like get list means search, or saving some data form, then they need to do, then most of the cases system will retry those things. But if those things not work, then at the end they may see some error message like what to do next. So we almost handle all these type of in-flight requests in Nino Midtier in a cluster environment, and in most of the cases we try to complete the action, but in some cases, like if you are running a report and your Midtier goes down, then in those cases Midtier is unable to do most of the things, so he just throw an error message to user.
Okay, thank you. I have another question. It may be a little complex, so I'll kind of read it slow. On server info, so the server info of the AR server has max entries returned by GetLess configured to the best practice value of 2,000. And then Form A has a value set to 1,000 for max entries returned, and Form B has it set to 5,000. So what will happen with all these different settings? What will be returned?
Okay.
How many?
Yeah, so as we have a 2,000 for max get entry list, so we always get 2,000 or less than 2,000 from server. So when you access a Form A which has a 1,000, it will show you a chunk of 1,000 on each page. But when you access a Form B which has a 5,000 value, in that case, because 5,000 is greater than 2,000, so we use 2,000 as a chunking. So we always use the minimum value from these all properties for chunking purpose. So these settings will not override your max entry setting. It just provide a way to chunk that data in a browser site, so that you always get the default pagination. You will never see a result list if it has a more than 2,000 data without pagination.
Okay, thank you, Gourav. And then again, if there's any other questions, please ask them via the Q&A. We'll just pause for a second for any questions to be asked.
I just want, if we don't have any question, then I just want to say like all these features are very well documented on docs.pmc.com. So just please visit and you will get the complete idea.
Okay, I have another question that came in. It may be environment specific, so if we can answer live, we can. If not, we may need to get more detail. It says, what is the suggested model for two URLs? Hang on. For two URLs, Remedy Web 2, which is the primary, and Remedy Web 3, which is for reporting. I'm assuming we don't cluster mid-tiers under them together. They both have individual clusters. Is that correct?
Can you come again, actually?
Yeah, I'll reread it. And we may, this question was asked by Pavan K. We may need to have more detail for Gourav to answer it, and he may need to answer it offline, but let me try again. What is the suggested model for two URLs? Remedy Web 2, which is the primary, and Remedy Web 3, which is for reporting. I am assuming we don't cluster mid-tiers under them together. They both have individual clusters. Is that correct?
No. So ideally, we should be having both mid-tiers in a cluster. As I understand, this is actually a follow-up question from Pavan K. I just saw his question on chat. The main reason why he's asking this is the user is currently connected from another machine. That is because the user either comes to Remedy Web 2 to perform normal operation, or they go to Remedy Web 3 for performing reporting operations. So if it's a non-admin user, if there are multiple clients connecting to the same AR server, it is going to give this error user connected, because the user can only connect via one client. So the way they should configure this is both these mid-tiers should actually share the same session. In load balancer though, they can actually write the rules to redirect the reporting requests to Remedy Web 3 and all other requests to Remedy Web 2. This way, from the browser standpoint, there will be only a single cookie, single domain, and when the browser sends a request, whether it gets to the AR server via Remedy Web 2 or Web 3, it's actually going to send out the same cookie value to AR server, which means the user, the AR server is going to assume this is actually the same client from where I'm getting the request. It is really the same user coming in from the same browser. It's not going to give it an error. I hope that clears it.
Perfect. Thank you, Gourav. And at this time, there doesn't look to be any other questions. And so just to recap, this webinar will be posted within a week, along with the final Q&A, and also the reference links that are provided on this presentation. I want to thank everybody for joining today, and thank you, Gourav, for taking us through this month's presentation. Thank you, and that concludes our webinar.
Now and forever, we bring IT to life.